It's an interesting thing, isn't it? How the mind works. How the past seems to hold on, like an echo in a canyon, bouncing back, even when the source of sound has already faded. And yet, it's also true that echoes, they always fade. They don't last forever. And that's because, ultimately, they were never solid to begin with. Just like memories of what you once thought was unchangeable. As you sit there now, perhaps noticing the rise and fall of your breath, perhaps even curious about what comes next. Isn't it fascinating to realize the mistakes, they're not who you are. They're simply things you once did, back when you didn't yet know what you know now. And just as the weather changes, without needing to remember the storms of yesterday, you too, you're not required to carry those clouds forever. Because if you think about it, failure, it's not a person, it's just an event. Fraud isn't a character trait, it's a story you once told yourself. And badness, that's just a label. A label someone may have stuck on you once, like a name tag at a party you don't even want to attend. And isn't it funny how easy it is to take that name tag off, crumple it up and throw it away? You start to notice even now, the mind can play games, can it not? It likes to whisper old fears, little warnings, as if keeping you safe from something that no longer exists. And you might even thank that part of you, yes, the very part, for its effort to protect you. But isn't it time now to lovingly let it go? That it's okay to stop. Because here's the thing, the more you try to fight those old feelings, the more they fight back. But when you simply let them float, like leaves on the surface of a stream, they lose their power, don't they? And just imagine for a moment, if you were to watch each of those old fears, each of those judgments, simply drifting downstream, further and further away, until they're no longer in view. Now here's something to consider. Every single human being, you, me, even the greatest minds and the kindest souls, have a past filled with missteps, regrets, things they wish they could undo. But isn't it also true? It's because of those missteps that we grow. Those mistakes, they're not chains to drag behind you, but stones to step on, lifting you higher and higher. And isn't it comforting to realize, no matter what you've done, no matter how heavy it once felt, there's a deep truth that who you are is not defined by a single action, or even 100 actions, but the decisions that you make in this moment and the next. So do you consider that now, as you allow that idea to settle deeper into your unconscious mind? Perhaps you could begin to notice that it's possible, isn't it, to forgive yourself. Because forgiveness, it isn't about erasing the past, it's about freeing yourself from it. And isn't it true deep down? You already know how to let go, like a breath you've been holding for too long. All it takes is a decision to exhale. And when you do, you begin to feel lighter, don't you? Now think of this, a tree, it doesn't resist shedding its leaves in autumn. It knows letting go is what allows it to grow new leaves, fresh and green. Comes spring, and just like that tree, you're already growing even now, because the roots of your true self, the part of you that's kind, resourceful and resilient, they're always there, aren't they? They never left. So what if you started to notice, in the days and weeks ahead, a quiet certainty growing within you, a certainty that you can move forward, that you are allowed to start fresh. You're not a fraud, but simply a human being, a beautifully imperfect, ever-changing, deeply worthy human being. And what if you found yourself smiling one day, seemingly for no reason, as you realize the truth? The past is simply a story, and the stories you choose to tell yourself now, that's entirely up to you. Because you're not your past, you're the author of your future. And doesn't it feel good to know that? And isn't it fascinating how the mind already knows how to learn what it needs to learn, even when you're not trying? Like the way you can hear a song for the first time, and somehow, without effort, the melody lingers, repeating itself gently in the back of your mind. That's how the mind works, isn't it? It absorbs, it integrates, it transforms. And sometimes, the very act of listening, it's the act of changing. Because here's a curious thing to consider. When you think about the past, are you seeing it as it really was? Or are you simply telling yourself a story about it? And if it's a story, doesn't it stand to reason that stories can be written? Even the most painful ones. You see, a story only has the power you give it. A story is a collection of words strung together, shaped by the meaning you attach to it. But what happens when you attach a new meaning? So imagine for a moment that your past were a canvas. At one time, perhaps, it seemed painted over in heavy, dark strokes. But what if you picked up a new brush, dipped it in light and colour, and began painting over it? Not to erase, but to create. Because every stroke, yes, even the dark ones, was part of the foundation of something greater. And as you paint, you realise it's not about covering up the old. It's about transforming it into something beautiful. And isn't it true, the idea of a fresh start? It isn't something you have to wait for, because the moment you decide to look forward instead of back, you've already begun. It's as if a door swings open effortlessly the moment you choose to step towards it. And each step forward takes you further and further from the shadows of what once was, doesn't it? Now think about this. If you ever walked through a dense fog, you know how it can make the world seem small, closed in, unclear. But as the sun rises and warms the earth, the fog begins to lift. And as it clears, you see the path ahead more clearly, don't you? And isn't it true, the fog of self-doubt, the fog of regret, is no different. It too dissolves under the light of awareness. And that light is already within you, isn't it? Because after all, the idea that you're a fraud, a failure, or unforgivable, it's just that, an idea. It's not a fact, is it? It's a thought. And thoughts can change. In fact, they're changing all the time, aren't they? Like clouds drifting across the sky, never staying the same. And if a thought can change, then doesn't it follow the way you see yourself can change too? And here's the curious thing. The very fact that you feel this desire to grow, to let go, to make a fresh start, it proves you're not the person you once feared you were. Because people who are truly bad or unforgivable, they don't think about making things right, do they? They don't seek growth, but you do. And that means you've already started. And as you hear these words, you might begin to notice a sense of possibility growing within you. Maybe it feels like a small spark at first, a flicker of hope, or maybe it's already a warm, steady glow. Either way, it's there, isn't it? Because you wouldn't be here, listening now, if that part of you, that part that knows you're capable of change, weren't already alive and active within you. Now imagine this. You're holding a book in your hands. It's the story of your life. As you flip through the pages, you see all the chapters that have already been written. Some are filled with joy, others with pain, others with moments you wish you could rewrite. But here's the thing. You're holding the pen now, and the next chapter, the one that begins today, that chapter is blank, waiting for you to fill it with whatever you choose. So ask yourself, what kind of story do I want to tell from here on out? What kind of person do I choose to become? And as you imagine those answers, notice how the old chapters start to feel lighter, less significant, because you realise they're just a part of the background now. Necessary, yes, but not defining. They brought you here, but they don't have to decide where you go next. And isn't it true, every mistake you ever made, it taught you something, gave you a lesson that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. And when you think about it that way, don't those mistakes start to seem less like failures and more like stepping stones, each one bringing you closer to the person you're always meant to be? So let those old beliefs, the ones that said you were a fraud or a failure or unforgivable, let them begin to dissolve now. Let them drift away like mist in the morning sun, because they're not serving you anymore, are they? And as they fade, notice what takes their place. A sense of worthiness, a sense of resilience, a sense that you are and always have been enough, because you are. And the funny thing is, as you realise this more and more, as you carry this new sense of self into the days ahead, you might begin to notice the old fears, the ones that used to seem so big. They just don't hold the same weight anymore. They become like whispers in the distance, easy to ignore. Because you're focused on what's ahead now, aren't you? And as you walk forward, step by step, you might even find yourself smiling. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know you're free. Free to create, free to grow, free to be exactly who you've always wanted to be. And doesn't that feel good?